Hi, here's May. Welcome to part 2 of my anatomy tutorial video. After explaining a basic guide to draw anatomy for your characters, I will now continue with stylization options and mention different tips as well as other artists' videos in this video. And if you haven't seen part 1 yet, I recommend checking that out first, since this is thought as a direct continuation. When you have a basic understanding of the proportions and anatomy down, it's then time to explore different ways of stylizing them and figure out what you like the most. What I would overall keep in mind when changing the proportions of your characters is to determine the age of the character and if they are maybe not just a human but also a animalistic character or an elf. You can explore many different options here, but I will mention some ideas of what you can change now. You can be inspired by forms or shape and have a character with lots of round shapes or edgy shapes. You can also work with your character's personality here. Then you can change up the amount of muscles and fat. Overall it should make sense, so don't add lots of muscle to the shoulders but then make the legs very fat. It's better to rather decide on overall, do you want the character to be more muscular or skinny or chubby, and then you can still play around a bit with how the muscles and the fat are distributed on the body. Then you can change up the length of the limbs. If you want your character to have longer arms, it's also a good idea to have the legs be longer, unless you want to create visually not as appealing characters, which could for example work for monsters. Often you will see that children have a bit shorter limbs, and you can check the silhouette of the characters. Especially when you're drawing a lineup of characters, it's good if you can which character is which by their silhouette and body type. And finally, with changing all these aspects, it's good to make sure that when you're changing them, the face also matches to the body. If you have a cuter body, try to make the eyes bigger and move them downwards on the face. For example, also working with the width of the neck is important here. So if you have a cute anime face, you could either do a cute chibi body, or you could also go for a taller, slimmer body but with a thin neck. Through learning all these things, you can determine a way you like to construct your bodies when drawing, what body types you want to use and what muscles you want to show. Determine what you want to simplify and stylize, and then apply this to your illustrations for different poses. This formula of how to draw bodies is unique to each artist and often develops and changes over time with additional things learned and making aesthetic changes to a style, or deciding to draw other types of characters. Next, I'll go over some really helpful tips, and if I'm taking this from one artist in particular, I'll mention them here. First, from Mark Brunet, I have the tip that the torso or the rib cage has the least amount of flexibility for changing up proportions, so this will stay mostly the same no matter what body type you're drawing. From Chomang, I got familiar with using either boxes or circles for drawing the rib cage. Boxes help more with perspective here, and circles are better for more dynamic poses or softer bodies. From Blue Biscuits, I found the tip that you can simplify hands by drawing 3 fingers as one shape and 1 finger separate. Very helpful, and that this can also create nice hand poses. Then some tips from Cynics are that the ring and middle finger will often be together for different hand poses, or at least in a similar position. I also noticed this for myself, that I myself can't fully extend my ring finger while keeping my middle finger in a fist position, for example. And what you can keep in mind is different from drawing the back or the front of the hand is that for the back side the fingers will be a bit longer, while for the palm the fingers will be a bit shorter. And in general, drawing some lines around the fingers here that go in front of the palm can make this clearer as well. Then another tip from Cynics is to not use a straight line for the spine and be aware that it's shaped like an S-curve. The final tip I have is from Draw Like a Sir, and this is to make lines or add shadows to the ends of muscles when you're portraying them. Now I move on to some exercises you can do to improve your anatomy. First, you could just draw from references, but first construct them and figure out how you want to show the anatomy of the person in the reference. It's good to not go for images where the body is very covered in clothes here. If you want to focus on just one body part and learn its anatomy, what can be very useful is to isolate it and look for references about that body part only. Learning about all the body parts at once can be very overwhelming, so only focusing on one at a time can really help. With references, you can always draw from them and then compare it to the reference and see if you made any mistakes, or if you want to portray the part of the body differently. If you want to check your understanding of anatomy for one part or the whole body, you can try to draw the body part or bodies at different angles without references. For practicing hand, you can draw arms at different angles first and then determine what hand poses would be possible by trying the arm pose out yourself. This helps with understanding how the hand works, and in general, for checking if the anatomy of a pose works, you can try doing the pose yourself and take reference photos or videos. And then something a bit more fun is to come up with body types from shapes like circles and triangles, and you can draw the same character but after they gained weight or they got more muscular or even at different ages. And this is an exercise I like to do, and I'll also show it for this part. This is using a pose you drew with or without reference, or tracing over a photograph or other artist's work you like, as long as you don't share it as your own and the artist hasn't said they don't want other people tracing their art. Using this pose you can mark the different muscle groups, and you can group the muscles depending on what you prefer. For example, I like to use this red color for the chest, then for the deltoid the yellow, and green and blue for the bicep and tricep and so on, and just repeating this over time helps you to get an idea of how the muscle looks from all kinds of angles in your mind. When you are tracing over a reference, you can also change up the anatomy slightly. This is a nice exercise to figure out how you'd like to stylize bodies when you are doing this from photographs of real people. For example, you can have the arms and legs change in direction more and taper more to get a more flowy kind of anatomy. Another exercise you can do is to take a photo reference where you don't see the whole body and you try to missing body parts in yourself. Then you can also change up the angle a pose is viewed in after drawing one pose, meaning you draw the pose from different angles, or you can draw from a reference and change up the pose slightly yourself and experiment with different arm positions, for example. And finally, I recommend different videos that go into more specific topics, and depending on your interests, you can check some of them out. Here I advise you to go for an artist that draws in a similar style to what you want to draw, but learning about more realistic proportions, even if you only want to draw simplified bodies, can help a lot too. First, I have to mention Cynics. His channel is really a goldmine for learning anatomy. He shows different parts of the body and breaks them down, sometimes in movement and even how to render the body parts. This is especially good for realism, but also includes ways to stylize and simplify the body parts. Then we have Marc Bonnet, and his videos are really good for a basic construction and learning about body types and how you can in general change up body types. I really recommend his videos if you want to draw different characters. From Psychra, I really like his videos about styling characters and posture. Then we have Chomang, who has some good videos you can draw along with and practice anatomy with them. From some normal artists, I like his way of explaining how you can use guidelines and why they are important. If you want to find out more about drawing chibis, I can recommend a video by Nico Rina. I also redrew a few of the poses from my daily drawing exercise, which I showed the drawings of while talking about the tips. And I did this to show how the way I portray the body changed over time. When I first drew these poses, I used circles for the joints and mainly lines except for the torso. You can see that they look flat, simplified and pretty skinny since I didn't include many muscle indications or changes of direction. Now I still like to use circles for the joints, but I like to think more about the perspective the different body parts are in, the form of them, by first using cylinders and sometimes boxes. After now having learned more about anatomy and applying this knowledge to the poses while still stylizing and simplifying them a bit, you can see the bodies look different now and to me nicer. I could still improve though, but that is always the case to me for my drawings. I hope this can help you get motivated to also try finding a nice exercise or practice routine you want to try out to improve your anatomy if that is your current goal, which I'm assuming since you watched this video up to this point. You don't have to do the exact same exercises that I mentioned, but I hope it gives you some ideas and things to try out, so you can find your own way of learning about and drawing anatomy. In case you are interested in hearing more about actually drawing line art of anatomy and portraying the muscles while shading skin, next week's video will include some of that, but it won't be part of this anatomy series, so this is the final part for now. And that's it for this video. I hope it helps you with drawing anatomy, and have a nice day. Goodbye.